into our speakers, and we're going to start with Dr. Aaron Gillich.
So yes, thank you. My name is Aaron Gillich. I'm going to present on what we're calling the CEREB Framework, the 5 pillars of successful retrofit programs. So I thought just before I dive into that, I'd give a little bit of context about how this fits in the overall kind of overall picture of retrofit. This is a curve that's commonly used for market transformation, to represent market transformation for usually relatively straightforward markets. And you can imagine how something like a dishwasher would move along here, you know, from the R&D stages to increasing a bit of market share with rebates and financing to correct the price point until you gradually get up to the point where codes and standards can be used to eliminate poorer performing products from the marketplace. Obviously, homes and retrofit are far more complicated than dishwashers, but they have to more or less follow the same sort of pathway or pattern. And we have the same list of regulatory and sticks and carrots, regulatory and financial tools to do it. So where we're trying to get to, the market share, we need at least, hopefully more, but at least 1 million whole house retrofits per year. And we need this as soon as possible, but I would say 2030 at the absolute latest. I mean, if we're not doing it at this rate by 2030, we have got a whole lot more to do every year after that. So far, where are we on this curve? We have different sort of tools like the Green Deal, the Energy Company Obligation, which was mentioned, and the upcoming Green Homes Grant, trying to work at different price points to modify price points and drive the uptake. Then we also have in some parts of the market, so things like this is just, for example, it's not an exhaustive list, but things like Part L, which is mainly for new build, decent homes and social housing, the new minimum energy efficiency standard for the private rented sector. Those regulatory tools are mainly targeted at specific niches, tranches of the housing market. The biggest tranche for kind of the owner-occupier, the able-to-pay market, it's around 63% of the homes out there, and there isn't really a policy stick. There's no regulatory tool that specifically targets energy efficiency in this area. So we are mainly relying on these kind of financial tools like ECO and the Green Deal so far. And this is really where I was curious about what this framework should look like. So this CEREB framework, as we're describing it, is really what we need in capacity building to deal with the steep part of this curve. Before we can get to the point where sort of a minimum performance baseline in these regulations is enough to let the market go and take this without public subsidy and deliver 1 million a year without public subsidy. So what does a sort of a capacity building framework need to look like? The way this was put together was we looked at around 50 or so different retrofit programs, all targeting similar objectives in similar places on this curve. And basically went through them and measured them against their stated objectives and figured out what worked where and why, and distilled them to this kind of collection of ingredients. And so I'll run through each of the 5 kind of briefly and then talk about them all together. The first is program design. So what this means effectively is looking at how the program fits into its kind of local market niche. All of these issues ultimately have to be handled at the local level. So it's understanding what else is active in that area and really specifically what ground game you need. What do you need to make it work on a local level? All too often you get kind of policies that are implemented at the national scale with a bit too much of a cookie cutter approach where it's not necessarily calibrated effectively to the local area. Marketing and outreach. So the important thing here is to distinguish between the 2 terms. So marketing is usually referring to sort of unidirectional information campaigns, things like websites, advertisements, even cold calling to a point can be marketing, because it's not really engaging and addressing people's barriers on an individual level. So most of the evidence on this shows that people are not yet ready to embrace this market at scale. We're talking at 1 million homes a year, just from a website. They need a more personal engagement with it. They need to have a bit of hand holding to sort of engage homeowners and bring them through the process. The next category is workforce engagement, which I could probably talk at length about. This is extremely important. And I think The main problem here is that we very often see the skills development as a market-based problem. And so whenever we do tend to reinforce sort of training and skills, it's usually in sort of the mechanics of a particular program, you know, how to be an EPC assessor, how to do certain things. It's not about the sort of core underlying skills that it takes to do whole house. You know, how do you bring together the trades that are out there? The funny thing is, I say we need to get to 1 million homes a year. We actually already are doing 1 million homes a year. Every year we put in between 1.3, 1.5 million new gas boilers in homes, despite all the climate emergency stuff. So we're getting into 1 million homes a year. We're retrofitting them just in completely the wrong way. We need to pull a complete 180 and be doing low carbon heating and all the demand reduction measures instead of more gas boilers. So the capacity is there, but sort of pulling a complete 180 with that workforce in the 10 years that we're talking about is just a massive problem that can't be solved just by saying here that there's a specific target to hit. We really have to get involved with the training and help the workforce make that switch. Financial incentives. So this usually receives most of the attention, and I mean there is a good reason for that. It is a very big part of it. We do need to reduce the cost of a lot of these measures, but not to the detriment of all the others. And in particular, we need to be more careful about using financial incentives and rebates to disrupt price signals in temporary ways. So what we tend to do is inject in a large amount of money as a rebate, and then the rebate's gone, and then so are all the good effects. And it actually can perturb the market in the long term. It does not help climb the steep part of that slope to keep sending mixed signals to the market. It doesn't let the workforce or the public kind of engage around the long-term growth of this market if we keep doing these start-stop initiatives. And then the last one is data and evaluation. So the main thing here is on evaluation and using it to sort of iteratively improve the program. Successful programs often use 2% or more of the program budget on this, which sounds like a lot and can be a lot, but it's a good use of money if it lets you spend the other 98% more effectively, right? And that really is the goal. So climbing the kind of the steep part of that curve, that you keep saying, that market transformation idea, is about measuring and evaluating more than just how much energy we're saving. It's all the other market indicators around changes to the supply chain, workforce levels of knowledge, consumer levels of knowledge, all these other things. So it's very important to sort of carefully define and measure what you want and use that to sort of iteratively improve your program. So as I say, we created this by looking at a number of different programs across the United States, Canada, and the UK. It's a sort of distilled version of a longer set of recommendations. And what I find interesting is that it lines up. If you look at the 27 recommendations in the Each Home Counts review, a lot of them line up very, very closely with this. So the labels to me aren't as important as the ingredients, you know, just getting it done. I think we're about to hear from some wonderful examples of local versions of things like this, again, with different labels, but local versions of programs that have targeted all these different parts of the supply chain to build this capacity. What I think really matters, that question of scale, the go big or go home, is how we get, I mean, we just said we have to work on what we need to do individually, but we also need to think about how we spend public money, right? Right now, we spend most of it on the financial incentives. The Green Homes Grant is going to do that again. We don't spend nearly as much attention on how we systematically address the other 4 areas. And the other 4 areas ultimately are about people, right? Program design is about the ground network, it's people. Outreach is people, engaging homeowners. Workforce and training is about people. Evaluation is about people. So I really think we need to, if we want to do this in the next 10 years, we have to start thinking harder about how we invest in people and not just in the measures themselves. So that's me. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.